welcome to another segment in our Briefly Focused series. Today's program is called Supporting Attorneys with ADHD and Executive Dysfunction Issues. I'm Ala Policastro, CLE Advisor for the Beverly Hills Bar Association, and I'm delighted to introduce today's speaker, Sarah Tetlow. Sarah is an experienced productivity consultant, trainer, and speaker for attorneys and other busy professionals. She helps law firms improve their bottom line and operate more efficiently. More importantly, Sarah's clients see a reduction in stress and anxiety and an increase in focus and new business. Through one-on-one consulting, strategic planning, workshops, and group training, Sarah works with attorneys, law firms, and busy professionals to find personalized ways in which to manage one's day with a proactive and focused approach. We can't wait to hear what she has to share with us today. Sarah?
Awesome. Great. Thanks, Alan. Nice to see you all again. I always love presenting with the Beverly Hills Bar. So hello, everybody. And as Ala said, this is part of the Briefly Focused series, focusing on challenges with ADHD or other executive dysfunction. If you haven't checked out some of the other programs, I highly recommend you do. I have seen a few of them and they're phenomenal. The speakers are really great. A lot of great expertise and looking at ADHD in the legal profession from different angles. I also presented on my ART email system to how to manage your inbox with ADHD. So supporting attorneys with ADHD and executive dysfunction challenges is what we're going to focus on today. And this is primarily about how to support them, but it also is for you, the attorney who has ADHD or other executive dysfunction issues. So if you're here today, you are in the right place. And I'd love to just learn a little bit more about who is joining us. So Rin, will you please put up our first poll? And if you can respond with the best answer that fits, or you can select multiple, who are you here today? Give it a few seconds if you're popping in. We are just doing a poll to see who's joining us today. All right, go ahead and close that poll. And while the results are showing up, I want to thank those of you who filled out the pre-program questions. It did help me tailor today's presentation to you. So hopefully you'll really recognize that I'm speaking to you and some of those questions you have or areas of challenge that we can address today. So it sounds like the majority of you are attorneys with an ADHD diagnosis or maybe without ADHD diagnosis. Either way, you're going to hopefully walk away today with a lot of nuggets that can help you work more productively. We have some that are the support team who have ADHD themselves and or are supporting attorneys that have it or they suspect they have it. And we have others who are both support members as well as a small group who are not any of those other areas. Okay, so let's dive in today. And I want to first say you are not alone. The ABA produced a study in 2016. So I want you to recognize that that was almost 10 years ago. And it is likely a larger number. At that time, what they found were about 12 to 13% of attorneys were self-diagnosing or self-reporting, as having ADHD. I think that number has gone up a lot. This is my own judgment of that based on the COVID-19 and the change in how we work, as well as an increase in awareness and conversations around neurodivergent brains. And so I think that number has actually increased quite a bit. But just to recognize that it is pretty common that a lot of attorneys live with ADHD. And certainly in my world, the coaching that we do on time management, there's a little bit of bias that I am more exposed to attorneys who openly say that they have been diagnosed or suspect that they are than when I used to work in law firms. I had no awareness. I had suspicions based on some behaviors, but I never had awareness about it back when I did work in law firms. So that's a good segue into who I am. If I haven't met you before, hi, I am Sarah Tetlow. My company is Firm Focus. I spent 15 years working litigation in law firms and created this company, really finding that my passion of time management, productivity, organization aligned with a need in the industry to help attorneys with those areas. And so the coaching and speaking and training that we provide at Firm Focus addresses project management, task management, time management, attention management, and ultimately email management. I mentioned earlier I did a program for the Briefly Focused series on our email system, which what we're doing there is teaching behavioral change on how to manage an inbox effectively. So that's an area of focus that came out of the coaching that I do at Firm Focus. Okay, so here is our roadmap today. I always like to start with a roadmap so you know where we're going on this journey together. So starting with understanding executive dysfunction, we're going to then talk about the role of the support staff. So I know some percentage of you today are the support staff. We're going to talk about that role. For the attorneys in the room, I think there's still a lot of really great takeaways you can take from that section, including how to maybe utilize your support staff to support and help you a little further. Then we're going to get into some practical strategies for both the attorney and the support staff. And at the end, we're going to talk about some case studies. And that's where I'm going to invite you joining the call today to be the expert. So just a little heads up, because we're going to be doing an exercise in a little bit, as well as those case studies. I am going to invite a couple of you, if you're willing to do so, to unmute and participate, giving feedback about how that exercise went for you. And in the case study portion, if you have anything to add, your own advice or expertise, that's where I will welcome a couple people to come off mute. Rin will help facilitate that so that you can participate in today's program. All right. Hopefully that sounds good. And oh, and by the way, when that comes up, I'll remind you again, you'll just need to use the reaction raise hand feature in Zoom. And that's the way that Rin can facilitate you coming off mute. All right. All right, so let's talk a little bit about understanding executive dysfunction challenges. Now, I asked you when you joined the program, what is the biggest challenge you face when trying to support attorneys who struggle with ADHD? Or since we have a lot of attorneys in the room, you can just flip that question around and say, what's the biggest support I need to be successful, and how can my team help me with that? So I took your responses and I created this chart. What we saw is project and task management was by far the biggest challenge. And it does make sense because we'll talk about some of these other areas in the results, but everything kind of interweaves together and goes hand in hand. So project management is saying, I have this large project and I need to break it down into working on it over time. And because the ADHD brain very much operates in loops and operates in a now and not now, project management is incredibly difficult. But the task that is in front of them, the task that is the now, is what they're usually focused on. And so I'm leading into some of the support that they could use is taking that big project and breaking it down to that task that can be the now, the thing I need to do now. Second to that, they struggle with disorganization. So that can go hand in hand with that project management as well. You'll see that there was sort of a tie between meeting deadlines, distractions, and communication challenges. Again, all little variables and nuances that relate to the project management challenges that the ADHD brain often has. And then at the bottom, there were a couple other responses I got. How to be supportive, coping strategies, delegation challenges, sometimes embarrassment can come with it, and paralysis. Paralysis is fairly common, and we're going to talk about that paralysis, perfectionism, procrastination, which again, all are related to each other at times. I want to, just as a coach for a lot of attorneys who live with ADHD, I really want to put a highlighter on that embarrassment one. And I want to just give you support that it's nothing to be embarrassed about. It's nothing to be shameful about. It's just a different way of thinking. And a lot of the same strategies that we use with any client, whether they are neurodivergent or neurotypical work with ADHD brains, there's just some additional hacks that we implement or breaking things down further. And we're going to talk about a lot of that today so that both you, the attorney, as well as you, the support staff, can walk away hopefully equipped with the knowledge and information and strategies that you can use to create a more fluid, healthy, and dynamic relationship together. Okay, so let's talk about what executive dysfunction is, what ADHD brain is. So first, it's time blindness. So the ADHD brain can easily, more so than the neurotypical brain, they can get caught into this time blindness, both in terms of okay, I'm just going to do this one more thing and I have time to do it before I have to jump on this meeting. And then they kind of get lost in thought or lost in time and they look up and X amount of time passed by and they're not always aware of it. So that time blindness can work against them. And they can also, I'll touch on this again in a moment, but time blindness can also occur where they are working on something that they're enjoying and they get kind of sucked into that. And the difference between the two examples I just gave is one is like, I think this will just take me a minute and I have 2 minutes before I need to get on this call. So I've got plenty of time. And then they look up and it's been 6 minutes and now they're late. Versus the second example I gave is, I'm working on a project and I'm enjoying it and I'm deep in thought and I look up and hours have passed by and I didn't even realize it. Procrastination is huge. Difficulty starting or finishing something is certainly heightened in the ADHD brain. They have poor working memory. Difficulty prioritizing. Again, we'll touch on all of these later when I talk about some strategies, but for the ADHD brain, it is especially difficult to say, what should I do first, second, third? I'll come back to a comment on that in a moment. Now, I put these hearts because these, I wanted to just point out, it's not all negative characteristics. We've got some really positive characteristics. That hyper focus I talked about on those passion projects, that can be something that really helps the ADHD brain, where if they have the time and they can enjoy working on something and get sucked in for a few hours, it can be a beneficial result. Everybody gets distracted, whether you are a neurodivergent or a neurotypical brain, we all get distracted. And sometimes this superpower actually is beneficial to the ADHD brain because the neurotypical brain, if you're that person and you're sitting here, you're going, that's a little harder for me at times because I'm like, okay, I got a little bored. I'm going to go over and do this other thing, even when it's something that you are a little passionate about working on. They're creative problem solvers, the ADHD brain. And it is ultimately a superpower. I have learned with working with so many different clients who have ADHD brain, it's not even a one size fits all. Everyone sort of shows up a little bit differently on how their ADHD contributes to the way they approach their work or their creativeness. We have one client who her superpower really is, instead of kind of looking at a brief and sort of linearly going through it, she kind of jumps all over with her creativity, and to see it play out with her is really enjoyable and fun. Going back to the difficulty prioritizing, it's funny, my sons, I was going to just share a little bit about, I have 2 boys, one is going to be 12 next month and a 10-year-old. And the 12-year-old has ADHD and the 10-year-old likely does not. And I laugh because my 10-year-old who does not have ADHD, and he thinks very much like I do, which is like, I can shout out like, we're going to be leaving the house. You need to brush your teeth and put your shoes and socks on and get dressed and feed the cat. And my 12-year-old who does have ADHD, he really needs like the reminders and the breaking it down. What was the first task? And so even if it made sense where you need to brush your teeth, then get dressed, then put your shoes and socks on, he kind of needs the tasks outlined for him because of the way his brain works in loops. And he gets mad at me because I often say, put shoes and socks on. Now, my 10-year-old goes, okay, great. And he throws his socks and shoes on. And my 12-year-old, my ADHD child goes, it's not shoes and socks. It's socks and shoes. So I laugh at it because, of course, I'm just saying shoes and socks because that's what comes out of my mouth. But he is trying to understand, in what order should I do this? And he gets frustrated that the order I am suggesting is not the prioritization of how he should put his socks and shoes on. So just a little interesting thing there that I connect to the way his brain operates. Now, I want to again shine a little bit of a light on why the legal industry magnifies these. And this is not to deter anyone. The legal industry is wonderful, and there are, as we established in the beginning from the ABA study, there are many attorneys who have ADHD or suspect they have ADHD and are quite successful, including some of you here today. But I just want to show why it might feel at times like the industry is not benefiting the way your brain thinks. The constant deadlines and the high stakes, that increases stress, which contributes to that time blindness, the procrastination, and the decision fatigue. The multitasking and the interruptions overload the working mind and making it harder to track tasks or to follow through. Perfectionism, paralysis, procrastination, and that fear of judgment can paralyze the task initiation or completion. So again, if we think back to that chart I showed initially, which was your responses, a lot of these things tie together. The project management can lead to the procrastination if you're not sure what the task is that you should be doing right now. And we think often in terms of now versus not now. The rigid structures and unclear expectations can be overwhelming to those who thrive with flexibility, clarity, and visual cues. And I want to step back for a moment, and I want to just talk a little bit about what is the ADHD brain. So ADHD, which stands for Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder, they no longer call it ADD. They took out the ADD definition, and now they're just all lumped together with ADHD. But certainly, as with my son, many of you are probably like, yeah, the hyperactivity piece is not who I am, but they still lump it all together. So it's a neurodevelopment disorder characterized by persistent patterns of inattention, hyperactivity, and or impulsivity that interfere with functioning or development. There's difficulty sustaining attention. Ultimately, what also contributes to ADHD, or a huge piece of it, is the dopamine difference. So dopamine is a brain chemical. It's a neurotransmitter that helps regulate motivation, attention, reward, and pleasure. It's the brain's internal fuel for getting things done and feeling good about doing them. And we're actually fairly simple. We complicate things, and our brain complicate things, but ultimately we're pretty simple in that to do an action, which we're doing actions all day, you do thousands of actions every day, but we need a trigger, an action, and a reward. And when it comes to habits, by the way, so habits, if you want to develop a good habit, you need to make it easy as possible, the trigger to then take the action, and then you get a reward on the back end. And if you want to stop a habit, you've got to make that trigger hard, a couple steps away, make it difficult. And then that will prevent the action, and there's no need for a reward. Or you can tie the reward to the behavior of, I didn't go out and buy the candy bar and eat it and then got the reward of, I ate the candy bar and I got the sugar rush, but I'm trying not to eat as many candy bars. And so I'm making it difficult by not keeping them in the house. So in a neurotypical brain, dopamine levels are stable. Even a routine or mildly interesting task can keep a neurotypical brain mostly focused. I say mostly focused because, again, especially in 2025, there are environmental, social, technological cues that pull us away, that distract us all the time. Nobody on this call is immune to the distractions. I say that productive people are productive because they have to use tools and systems to keep them on track. And we're going to talk about some of those tools and systems later. Now, for the ADHD brain, their dopamine levels are lower and more dysregulated. So mundane and repetitive tasks often feel very physically uncomfortable or unbearable because they don't generate enough dopamine. They're constantly seeking stimulation, the ADHD brain, so that they can replenish their dopamine. Now, just as a sort of a footnote or caveat, I'm actually working on my first book. It's called The Perfectly Productive Day. Hopefully, it'll be published by the fall of this year. And in my research for the book, talking about the morning routine section, the perfectly productive morning. By the way, there's no such thing as a perfectly productive day. That's part of the idea of the book. Is it's not about having a perfectly productive day. It's about knowing what you need to set yourself up for success. So the reason I bring that up now is there are multiple studies, and I know I'm about to say something that you already know. So you're going to go, yeah, I know. Thanks for reminding me. But I'm here to talk about supporting attorneys with ADHD. There are multiple studies that say if you check your phone, your email, your social media, the news, first thing in the morning, that is going to impact your productivity, excuse me, for the rest of the day. It is further heightened for the ADHD brain. Because your dopamine levels and your cortisols are replenishing overnight, when you do that first thing in the morning, it's as if that battery was fully charged and you just drained it. And throughout the day, you've got to work hard to keep it 10%, 15%, back to zero, up to 20, which is why you keep seeking out something, some task, some distraction, some behavior that can help you keep that battery slightly energized. Whereas if you do not check your phone, news, social media, email, any other external inputs, if you refrain from it for at least the first hour of your day, meditate, drink some coffee, go to the gym, go for a walk, play with the dog, play with the kids, go return something at a store that is open at that early in the morning. But if you do something different, then that battery drains slower as we would expect it to. And you don't have to work as hard. You won't get as easily distracted throughout the day. Okay, so let's get into the role that the support staff can play in supporting attorneys with ADHD. Here are some of the things that they might need, and they may not always be able to articulate it, whether it's that they aren't aware of it in some cases, or that relationship you have with them. I again recognize everyone on the call is in a different position. I know sometimes people have a really, really great, almost a friendship relationship with the attorney and the support staff. Others, they are just coworkers, and we're here to get the job done. So knowing where you are in that spectrum, you can obviously pull from this list the ideas that will resonate with you and the team that you're supporting or getting support from. What attorneys often need are consistent routines. So again, most of this we're going to cover a little bit later when we get into strategies. They need gentle accountability and reminding, and not just the reminding, but actually some prompts. Again, we'll dive a little bit deeper into that later. They need help being organized. Even sometimes I have ADHD clients that appear organized, maybe physically they look organized, but they don't feel very organized. And so they might benefit from some help with you offering ways to help them stay organized. Again, some of the strategies we will unlock today. Visual tactile cues. They need systems, but not complicated systems. They need systems to be simplified. They often need help with planning. That's that project management again. That's that now versus not now. And so the planning, which is a critical thing for productivity and time management, sometimes they're going to need support with that. The support person should almost think of themselves as the productivity translator and create some systems that are simple enough to work with the attorney and help them be successful overall. I wanted to do an exercise. I love doing activities. If you've been to one of my programs, you know I always try to incorporate a fun activity. And so what we're going to do in a moment is I'm going to be putting some math questions up on the screen. They're not super simple, like 5 plus 3, but they're not terribly complicated. And I laugh and say not terribly complicated because I did them myself. And I was like, wow, these take a little bit of focus to do these math problems, but you can certainly do them in your head on a sheet of paper. Please do not use a calculator because this is not about scoring and getting your results. You don't even need to find out the answer, but just do your best to go on the page and answer as many questions as possible. So I'm going to put those math questions up in just a moment. Again, no calculator, and you can just do them in your head or on a sheet of paper, or if you printed the handouts, there is a printout of these as well if you have access to do that now. Okay, so I'll give you a few minutes to go ahead and do these math problems on the screen, just as far as you can get in the few minutes that we do them. About 30 more seconds. Okay, so wrap up the problem you're on. And I'm not giving any answers. So if you want to find out the answer later, that's fine, but that is not the point of our exercise today. We're going to do another one. So this one was the neurotypical brain. The next one, we're going to demonstrate what the neurodivergent brain might look like. So again, I'm going to put a different set of math problems on the screen and just start working on the problems for about 2 or so minutes. Oh, and there's the other set. Do you know that you can't lick your own elbow? Have you ever tried that before? I tried it after. I can't lick my own elbow. If you're just joining, we're doing some math problems on the screen. So if you can just start working on them, you can write it down on a piece of paper. I also learned my friend was just in Paris and the Eiffel Tower grows 6 inches every summer because of heat expansion. That seems really interesting. I'm wondering, would I want to go in the winter where it's shorter or probably in the summer when it's taller? Because then you're like, I was at the Eiffel Tower when it was taller. Tomatoes are fruit, so does that make ketchup a smoothie? Have you ever thought about that? Hmm. Hmm. Do you know that sharks actually existed before trees? Super interesting. Yeah. Sloths can hold their breath longer than dolphins can. I wonder what color a mirror is. What color do you think a mirror is? That's interesting. Hmm. If you had to pick a theme song for your life, what would it be? What would that theme song be? Would you rather have to forget your own name or speak in terms of song lyrics all the time? Okay, we'll do about 30 more seconds on this one. Isn't it interesting that bananas are berries, but strawberries aren't berries? Who came up with these names? It's weird. Okay, so this is where I'd like to, if you would like to raise your hand and share the second exercise, what you probably figured out is I was trying to demonstrate what a neurodivergent brain is like, where the distractions, whether it's their own random thoughts, thinking in terms of those loops, or other external noises, visual cues can be heavily distracting when they're trying to focus. And so I would love to invite, if you want to use the reaction feature to raise your hand, just any of these questions or your own reaction to the two math problems. Yeah, Colin, I'd love for Rin, if you wouldn't mind letting him unmute.
I felt like I actually performed better during the second one. I was paying attention to your prompts somewhat, but it just kept me stimulated more and kept me on task somehow.
Okay, yeah.
I don't know if that's the right answer.
There's no right answer. This is just your own feedback. And Colin, it's okay if you do not want to share, but if you're willing to share if you have ADHD or not.
Definitely do.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right. How about Ronnie?
Yeah, I finished both of them exactly the same amount of time. When you said 30 seconds, I was done. I knew what you were doing immediately, and I just tuned you out.
Okay,
I paid no attention.
great. And are you willing to share? And I'll just ask everyone, and it's okay if you are not, if you have ADHD diagnosis or not.
Yes, I have a diagnosis, and I'm going for an assessment in 2 months to see what kind.
Okay, great. Thank you for sharing that reaction. Jordana, if you want to be invited to unmute, share your contribution, and then if you mind sharing whether or not you have ADHD.
Yeah, so I finished the first one very quickly. I really like numbers, and in school I was always told, you're better at English, you're better at writing, which is why I'm a lawyer now. But I really do love math and numbers, and I use it a lot in my practice. I make Excels and stuff. So I liked to do the hand. I was like, oh, this is great. But the second one, I was actually interested in the facts that you were sharing, and I was like, oh, another piece of information for me to glean. So I started paying attention, and then I didn't do as well on the second one because I just love the information.
I love
Yeah.
it. And do you mind sharing whether or not you have a diagnosis?
I mean, I don't have an official diagnosis, but I operate under the assumption that I do.
Okay. Great. Thank you for sharing. I want to just share for a moment, when I did these math problems myself, it took me 2 minutes and I don't even remember if I finished all of them. And I do not have ADHD. So remember that superpower? You all have a superpower. When Ronnie, I think you said you were done at a minute and a half. That is impressive. And as Connor pointed out, the second one, the distractions were almost calming to you because you were able to sort of you were aware of them, but you were still able to focus on what was in front of you. This is an insight into the way your brain works, because I think I would have been very easily distracted, as Jordana was, in hearing the facts. I probably would have really struggled because when I was even doing them, I was doing them in a quiet office, which I mostly like to work in, but I often also go to coffee shops, and I can tune out most of it. But when there's somebody that's like, I had a guy tapping his coffee cup, and I'm like, that is driving me bananas. And for the ADHD brain, sometimes you can, like you pointed out, you can sort of hyper focus and sort of tune it out. But other times, those little noises that many of us don't really pay attention to until you draw our attention to it, they are highlighted for you, and that can be very easily distracted, or in some cases, it might actually be normal for you and help you focus. Similarly, like I've learned that a lot of attorneys with ADHD can work with like a podcast going on in the background, for example. I find that incredibly difficult. In fact, I usually prefer music where I don't know the lyrics too well. Otherwise, I'm going to start singing along. So, but we all show up differently. Everybody shows up differently. So this is not formalitic. And also today is not about fixing anybody. No one needs to be fixed. It's just trying to introduce some strategies for you and for your support staff. And if you are the support staff, what you can do to also help some of the attorneys you work with. So we will be diving further into that as we get into this section on practical strategies. Thanks again, everyone who unmuted and participated. I'll be inviting people to do that again when we get into the case studies in a few minutes. So in our pre-programmed survey, I asked what helps to keep the ADHD attorney organized or on track. So remember when we talked about what are some of the things they need, or some of the things that the characteristics they have, like the disorganization, procrastination, paralysis, needing reminders. Here's where we're going to talk about the strategies for it. So overwhelmingly, reminders came back as what is the number one need that attorneys have. They need a lot of reminders, but we're going to dive a little bit deeper into what that means, because it's not about reminding and checking a box that I remind it. It's really about the follow through with the reminder. So we'll definitely hone in on that a little bit further in a moment. Next to that was boundaries. They need to have some boundaries in place to get the work done, to not get easily distracted. This doesn't necessarily go hand in hand, but sometimes because of the ADHD brain, that people-pleasing personality kind of comes out because of the distraction, not necessarily because of the people-pleasing characteristic. But it's, oh, well, I didn't get to the thing over here because this pulled me away and I needed to take care of it. Third to that is the accountability. So that goes hand in hand with the reminders. Then we have what's called Parkinson's law. So Parkinson's law is the adage that work expands or shrinks to fill the time for completion. So that, in other words, it means you've all probably had the situation where you had a court filing by 4 p.m. You had to get it to the process server, or you were leaving for vacation at 4 p.m. Anything like that, where all of a sudden that your time has shrunk and you're going to be kind of laser focused. Whereas if you had 3 weeks to write that article and it's gonna take the 3 weeks to write it until you're in that crunch time, where now that time available for completion has shrunk and you're going to squeeze in what you need to do to get that finalized. The other ones, jumping down to that same kind of 7%, lists and writing things down are effective strategies. Teamwork, that goes with the accountability, the boundaries, the reminders. Systems and processes, especially repeat stuff, which is, I know we talked about earlier, the boring or mundane tasks. Systems are needed and familiarity is appreciated, but also breaking it down. So the systems have to be small steps that are kind of swallowable in that now moment versus the not now. And preparation is helpful, which is funny because of the project management struggles. The preparation goes in hand with the project management, which is where the support staff can really help you. So again, we'll hone in a little bit further on those. And then lastly, I saw awareness of time wasters. So knowing what it is that pulls you away. Medication helps. Single tasking helps. Taking breaks helps. Visual aids like whiteboards, something where you can see the big picture. And putting things in the calendar. For a moment on the medication, I am not a doctor. So for that, I know one person mentioned, like, I wish I could get off medication. And obviously, this is not an area I am going to get into for very many reasons. but I do encourage you to work with your doctor on what you need best in that case. And again, there's no shame in it. I know with my son, who is medicated, but because of the way his ADHD shows up, we have chosen to only medicate him on school days. So over the summer, he is not medicated. So any breaks like that or weekends, because he doesn't need it. He really needs it for that focus and not because of behavioral issues or hyperactivity or extreme ADHD. So I just wanted to point out that please talk to your doctor and do what you know is best for you in that category. All right, so let's get into these strategies. So let's first approach the communication strategies. So what they really need is, we talked about the reminders, and that's what I heard, but the reminders should really be in the form of prompts. So what I've seen is, let's say the relationship is the attorney has asked, or we've all agreed that, can you remind me that this motion is due next Wednesday? And please, send me multiple reminders. And so with the support staff, what I've often seen is like, they're kind of thinking of it as like I want to show that I listened and I'm doing what they asked, but I'm just checking a box. So they might send an email or a Slack or Teams instant message and say, just a reminder, that brief is due next Wednesday, send. Check the box. And then they move their own tickler or track to remind them again on Friday. So they remind them today, and then they're going to remind them on Friday, and then they're going to start reminding them every day. But for the ADHD brain, that is now versus not now, where that struggle comes in is they are aware of it. They probably haven't even forgotten that that brief is due on Friday. What they really need are prompts. They really need not just to check the box, reminder that brief is due next Wednesday, but instead what they need is help with breaking down that project, with that accountability. So the reminder should be just a reminder that brief is due next Wednesday. What are you going to work on next? Or when are you going to get, when can I expect the declaration so I can start finalizing it and get the answer back? So again, depending on the relationship you have with the support staff or with the attorney, have that conversation and align that need with some further prompts. And I'm going to give you a couple verbal examples in a moment. I put in here, this is the last reminder, because what I have also seen is it can get frustrating, not necessarily in the example I just gave, but I've seen examples where a very, very organized attorney, the partner who has ADHD and is very disorganized and overwhelmed and busy, has asked the other associate attorney, please remind me all the time for these things. And then the associate's like, I feel like I'm managing my own projects and tasks as well as theirs, and I'm getting burnt out about it. So this is not about getting burnt out. And so there may be this reminder, this is due next, or now we're at the point where it's Monday or it's Tuesday, and we say, just a last reminder that this is due tomorrow. And if you've received the responses to the prompts throughout that scenario that I've given, then they're already making progress on it, because they said, yeah, great. The next thing I'm going to work on is I'm going to draft the MPAs. And then the next reminder, the next prompt is, did you get the MPAs done? What's next? When are you blocking time to work on it? So they need a little bit of coaching, if you will. So, but then come Tuesday, this is my final reminder. You've sent me these documents. I'm still waiting on these. So these prompts can be really helpful in that communication. Breaking down projects into bite-sized tasks. So that project management is a challenge for them. As the support staff, you might be better at thinking through the process. You've been here before. You know what a lot of what we do. My background was mostly in litigation. I also did some transactional work as well. A lot of things would benefit from a checklist or a process. They're pretty similar, and you can expect the same kind of thing a different day. We know the cadence of the motion, the reply, the motion, the opposition, and the reply. And there's a process in there. And so that familiarity that you have can help them. They are also familiar with the process, but with the now versus not now, they really struggle with thinking through the process instead of what is it that I need to just handle today and in this moment. So helping to kind of break that down. Here's where we are at in the process. Here's what we can expect next. And then through those prompts, supporting them through that success. That again, with the prompts, also asking open-ended questions. So I love this question. I have it on my computer. When I get stuck on, I'm procrastinating on something, I'll say to myself, Sarah, what is your next action? Because my next action, that is a question that I have proposed to myself that I then want to answer. When I was doing the math thing, when I asked a couple of them in terms of questions, you probably naturally, if you were tuned into me at all, you probably naturally wanted to kind of answer it. And so if you ask yourself, what is your next action? Or if your support team uses that as a prompt, that can help with that paralysis. Because often what we find is the next action is actually not what we thought it was going to be. As an example, one of my clients, when we were working on her, I call it a trusted system, which is a fancy way of saying to-do list. When we were working on that, she had on there text Steve, her client. And I noticed that she was going to move it to the next day. Now, text Steve is something that should be the action. What's my next action? Text Steve. But the fact that she was moving it, that took more time than texting Steve. And so I really dove into what it was. Well, what's your next action? I need to text Steve. What does that mean? Text him with what? And as we dove into it, we realized it was a really sticky situation where she was in, it's an old school where she actually had to be in a different office where the physical file was in order to text him about what she needed in that file. And so she was moving it because that was when she was going to be in the next office. But it was much deeper than just texting Steve. It was actually like the next action is, well, I can't take it until, I can't do it, excuse me, not take it until tomorrow. And I need to pull the file. So maybe I can ask my assistant in that office if she could have the file pulled and on my desk so that when I get in, I have now trigger behavior reward. The trigger is the file is ready and waiting for me, and I can send that text to Steve. Or I can ask my assistant if all I need to know is what I wrote on the piece of paper that is at the top of that file. Can you send that to me? And now I can text Steve today. So there's a difference in, I just need to text Steve, I'm feeling overwhelmed, versus what really is happening in that scenario. Okay, I'm gonna move a little quicker through the rest of it. I'm getting very excited and animated on some of this, and I want to get to these case studies before we wrap up. I'll also take this moment to say, I may go a little over in terms of Q&A. I invite your Q&A. You're welcome to put it in the Q&A chat box at any point, or at the end, I can facilitate it if you're able to unmute yourself. You do not need to stay late, but you are welcome to if you've got some questions. Okay, mental simulation. This is a behavior that I work with people on called my shutdown routine, which is really like what's on calendar tomorrow, what are the non-negotiables, what do I need to get done, which again is sometimes difficult for the ADHD brain to say, I'm in the now, not the not now. What mental simulation is, which helps overcome procrastination, is it's basically telling your brain what the scenario is going to be so that when you truly get there, it says, I've been here before and I know what to do. Let me give this in a real life example. Let's say as the support person, you prompt them, want to remind you that brief is due next Wednesday. What is your next action? I just got to I'm going to work on my declaration tomorrow morning. Great. What time? I'm getting in at 9. I'll start it like at 9:30. And I'm not saying necessarily that the dialogue will go into this much detail, but just so you understand the mental simulation. Okay, you get in at 9:30. Nothing has changed in terms of how you normally operate. You get in at 9:30. And there's still emails. There's still paperwork on your desk. There's still your coworkers walking around. The same distractions are going to greet you tomorrow morning at 9:30 that greet you every single day. So what mental simulation is it's saying, I need to work on this declaration tomorrow at 9:30. And maybe I even time block it in my calendar. But that doesn't solve the behavior that we want. What does is by saying, I'm going to get in at 9. I'm going to check emails. I'm going to talk to my coworkers, and at 9:30, when that pull comes that there are so many other dopamine hits, so many other things I could be doing in that moment, I'm going to work on the declaration. And I'm going to open it up in iManage. And I'm going to just start with that first. I'm going to actually open up the last iteration I did from the former brief that we filed, save it as a new version. And then I'm just going to start writing out the declaration based on the facts that I know. So the next day, when that happens, because it happens every day, you get in and there's all these different distractions. When it comes to 9:30, the calendar says this is what you're doing. This is one additional strategy. You're still going to have to work hard. It's not like I'm serving this up on a platter for you, but it definitely helps to overcome procrastination when your brain says, I know what to do here. One other tool I want to provide you is I use this time timer. Time timer is this box that I looked over at earlier to time manage myself. And the time timer can help where I get in at 9. I set it for that 30 minutes that I can check email, talk to people. But when it comes to 9:30, now is when I'm going to start working on that declaration. Okay, so let's talk about workflows and organizational tools. Visual task boards, Kanban style, like Asana, Trello, or Planner. So the ADHD brain struggles with long lists, but they benefit from something visual. On my website, which I'll give you these resources at the end, Microsoft Planner, if your firm is a Microsoft user, you likely already have that tool available to you at no cost as part of your Microsoft suite. And so I have a resource on how to use it on my website at Firm Focus under services and resources. There'll be a QR code later for that. Workflow and organizational tools, color coding and symbols, maybe even using icons for urgency or status. So I've seen relationships where they say it's 411 if it's information only email, 911 if it's an emergency that I need your support or help with. Templated routines and standard checklists for reoccurring tasks. So I talked earlier about the processes. Having that written out is very helpful. So I know what to expect for the motion. We need, for a motion to compel, we're going to need the motion, we're going to need the exhibits, we're going to need the declarations, and the proof of service is on the support staff. And then the time timer, which I just referenced. Definitely recommend a time timer. It helps with systems and tools to keep you on track. So here's that QR code. And actually this one, sorry, this is for signing up for Firm Focus productivity hacks. Totally optional. I try to send it once a month, but I am going to be sending it tomorrow. And it has been 4 months since I sent one because I've been busy. And I'm going to give away a free time timer in the one that I send tomorrow. So if you're interested in entering to receive that, you're welcome to take that QR code and sign up for productivity hacks. Okay, let's talk about strategies for project, task, and time management. Build in buffer times. This is not me suggesting that you calendar the wrong dates in Compular or Prolar or whatever you use. You certainly want to calendar them accurately, but it's about kind of tricking the brain. So in the example I gave earlier where the brief is due next Wednesday, how can you trick your brain to have a false deadline so that that Parkinson's law supports your behavior in getting things done without waiting until the last minute? And what I mean by that is it could be something like you tell the client, I will have your declaration to you Friday by noon. So now you have this deadline, but it's a client that is okay if you're an hour or two late, because I don't want it to seem like it needs to be a hard deadline. It might be depending on the client, but now you want to succeed. You want to get them their declaration by Friday at noon. So the support person can help you with those prompts like, hey, we're going to get this over to Jane Friday by noon. What's your next action? When can I expect that draft that I can send over to them? Use routine anchors like every Monday we meet for 10 minutes and go over what the projects are for the week so that I can help you manage what those tasks are and those milestones. A Pomodoro method is working for 25 minutes straight, uninterrupted, rewarding yourself with a 5-minute break doing something unrelated to the project. A modified Pomodoro is coming out because sometimes, especially with the ADHD brain, at the 25 minutes, when you all of a sudden got that hyper focus and that motivation, you don't want to stop. And so a modified Pomodoro would be you accumulate the break time. So you work for that hour and 15 minutes, and then you take that 15-minute transition. The 5Ds and ART. ART is my proprietary email system. It stands for taking action, referencing an email, tracking an email, or trashing an email. And it's related to a productivity principle called the 5Ds. The 5Ds says with every action we take, we do it, we delay it, we delegate it, we diminish it, or we delete it. Everything is do, delay, delegate, diminish, or delete. So this can be helpful in just recognizing, I need to do this thing. Can I do it now? Is it a delay? Is it something I can delegate? Is it something I need to diminish? So do it over time or in sections, or do I actually not need to do this and I can delete it? And again, that prompt, those milestone check-ins with gentle accountability. All right, let's wrap it up with the case studies. So thank you for those, again, who filled out the pre-programmed survey. I did read some of the real-life examples or questions that you had, and I wanted to set up these case studies. So if I can get a volunteer to unmute just to read our first case study. Raise your virtual hand. Ren, thank you, Daniel. Ren will invite you to unmute.
Right, Daniel, if you could please unmute your mic. Thank you.
Okay. You want me to just read it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Case study 1, missed deadlines. Jamie is a legal assistant at a mid-sized firm. They are working with an attorney who always misses deadlines and has even missed client calls. Jamie suspects that the attorney may have ADHD. It is also very frustrating for Jamie to have to make up excuses or clean up the mess that this attorney makes. How should Jamie best support this attorney?
Excellent. Thank you, Daniel. And you are welcome to respond if you would like to. Otherwise, I will also invite one or two others to. What would you advise Jamie to do?
Let's see.
Reading it is different than digesting it. Yeah, digest it.
Exactly. Let's see. So, okay, so Jamie misses deadlines and calls. Okay. Well, I mean, I think Jamie could certainly try to work with the attorney in getting the attorney to, set up some of these project task and time management tools. So I think, certainly that would be something that the assistant could hopefully do. And maybe, I don't know, create some accountability for the attorney so that maybe the attorney actually, has accountability to the assistant. Obviously, that has to be worked out the right way since the assistant works for the attorney. The attorney doesn't work for the assistant. But I think that there are probably ways that if the attorney is, willing to do it, setting up some accountability could really help too.
Great. I think those are some great responses, and we have 3 case studies, so I'll invite one more person if you would like to chime in on this one, if you think you have a great response, and otherwise I'll also offer some stuff and then we can move to the next case study. Thank you, Daniel. Okay, seeing none right now, and be prepared. I'm going to invite someone else to come off mute to read case study number 2. So if you'd like to do that, you can raise your hand in just a moment. So you mentioned, Daniel, breaking things into smaller tasks, gentle reminders, and you're right about the support person works with the attorney, excuse me. So I realized in my program, I didn't really define that relationship, but I wanted to just offer some solutions that can be modified based on how that relationship is, of course. I would suggest, though, this ultimately can benefit everyone is to have that conversation about how this might be impacting everyone. Ask the attorney what they think. Jamie could ask the attorney, what would you like me to do to help in this situation? Because we are a liability for malpractice, or clients are getting very upset with me and I've been managing it, but what would you like me to do? And behind the scenes, what might be happening, it could be literally just, I completely forgot, but even that might come with some shame or embarrassment. And so by having the conversation with them and getting their buy-in on what would you like me, Jamie, to do, might just help set up a scenario where Jamie goes, I looked at the calendar, I knew about the appointment, I got sucked into a different or sorry, not Jamie, the attorney. I got sucked into another project. I missed another meeting. I'm now beating myself up. I'm feeling shame. And then it just keeps happening. And instead of kind of addressing it, it continues to happen. Whereas we could have a conversation where maybe what this leads to is the attorney says, you know, what I need you to do is just send me a text 2 minutes before every meeting on my calendar. That will be helpful because my text will interrupt me and I'll go, oh crap, I have that meeting right now. So there might be just a miscommunication happening in our first case study. All right, may I invite someone else to read case study 2? And I do recognize we are at 11. So if you need to jump, just so you know what's coming up next, case study 2, case study 3, and then I am just wrapping up with the takeaways and the resources. So we are getting near the end, and then I'll obviously stay for Q&A. But if you do need to jump, that is the part that you're missing, so you can decide whether or not you need to revisit the recording. All right, volunteer for case study number 2.
If you would like to volunteer, please use the raised hand function in Zoom, and I'll give you the permission to unmute.
I'll read this one just so we can move. And if you want to read case study 3, be ready for that. Scroll syndrome nightmare. Becky is an attorney who lives with ADHD. Becky recognizes that she chronically multitasks and jumps from task to task. She wishes to mitigate this behavior and is willing to use tools, support, and accountability to do so. What could Becky do to help herself control this behavior? Do I have any inputs from any of you? What could Becky do? Yeah, Ronnie.
Sorry, I was trying to unmute.
Okay.
Well, basically the scenario you set up that I'm going to get in at such and such an hour, I'm going to have this clock or my associate tell me to start at it's 9:30. You know, what are you going to do next? Those kind of things where you are planning not in the future so much, but in the immediate. So to keep yourself more focused.
Great. I love that. So it sounds like some of the strategies we talked about today could be helpful. The time timer, the mental simulation. Your brain says, I've been here before. I know what to do. I love your addition. I didn't say that. I think that's a great addition, is use that accountability, asking your support staff, I need to start working on this at 9:30. I need your help in me getting started. Yeah. Daniel, do you have something else to add?
Yes, I mean, I think that, well, I'd be curious to hear if your perspective on this, but I think, and I've certainly been in that situation many times, and I think having like some form of a visual task board could help you stay on task if that's like front and center for you, and you know that you've got to accomplish this within a certain amount of time. Um, I don't know. I think that could be really helpful. Just something that visually is constantly reminding you to stay on task.
Yeah. Yeah, great. That was actually one of my big takeaways is I call that visual board. So Asana, Trello, Microsoft Planner have that Kanban style. If you're not familiar what Kanban is, it's like storyboards almost, and you can organize them in different ways. It's what I use to plan and organize my business, and I often work with clients to get it set up in a way that's healthy. But what I love about it is it has the dashboard where you can filter down to what is just today, what is in front of me today, and then you can prioritize it, and then you have that visual board to work off of. I need to work on this, and then this, and then that. Bindu, why don't I have you come off mute and share a little bit?
Okay, thanks. One of the things that I wanted to add to the accountability component that I have found helpful is finding a coworker who also has ADHD. And what we did this yesterday, we both had discovery deadlines to meet. And we all work remotely. But I just asked her, I was like, do you want to co-work with me? So we just hopped onto a Zoom and we put up a Pomodoro timer, which the modified Pomodoros, now that you've mentioned it, makes a lot more sense for how we both work. But we utilized that sort of accountability and time blocking to get our work done because we both have these issues of chronically multitasking, chronically getting distracted. So I think when you just see somebody who is kind of going through the same thing, I mean, we were both on mute, but we can actually see each other and see the timer. It helps. And obviously we procrastinated, but it helps in that situation.
I love it. So adding on to what you're saying, this is great. There's actually online, there is a tool called FocusMate, FOCUSMATE. It's free for so many meetings, but it is that having a coworker online, it's someone you don't know. And the expectations, the culture of FocusMate is you just get on video with that person and you say, Bindu, what are you going to work on? And you say, I've got to work on some discovery. And I say, I'm going to work on my book. And then we both mute and we work, and you leave your video on, but you can overlay it if you don't want to just be seeing that person. And then the timer goes off and you report, how did that go? Like, did you stay on task? So if you don't have a coworker like Bindu is fortunate enough to have, there are other resources that are designed to support that. The other thing I was going to mention is, if you want to reach out to me, I can send you one of these notepads, but this is a very simple technique too. Before you leave for the day, write out for the next day, what are the 3 things I have to get done tomorrow? And you'll know what they are, whether it's top of mind or looking at your trusted system, your to-do list, or your email, although email is communicating what you need to do, not laying out what you need to do. You could just use a standard Post-it too if you don't need this one, but just write it out for yourself, because we trigger, action, reward. The trigger, the action of getting it done, and the reward is we get to cross it off. Plus I add at the bottom, what is that win for yourself for the day? I get to, maybe there's a certain beverage that you want to enjoy after work. Maybe it's, I'm going to go for a walk, or I'm going to watch my series tonight with my partner. So you get to pick that little reward so that we do the healthy behavior. Okay, great. Last case study here. Do I have someone who would like to read the shoot from the hip emails? Okay, I'll go ahead and read this one and then be thinking about if you have something to add to it. Marla is a paralegal on a busy litigation team. John is a senior associate on the team and has disclosed to Marla that he has ADHD. John will often send short, abrupt, and terse emails. It often affects Marla's ability to stay organized and focused when she has to manage the instant message style of communication. How would you coach Marla and or John to improve their collaboration style? Any recommendations here? Okay, so I'll share what my recommendations are. Knowing both sides of this, that John's, sometimes he just thinks of something, he needs to get the message to Marla because he'll otherwise forget. And so what we want to find here is alignment between John's behavior that he kind of can't break entirely, versus Marla's receiving of the message, which is causing her to leak time and be disorganized and feel frenetic. And so one solution could be Marla could set up like a shared document and be like, hey, when you have these thoughts, if they're not, urgent that you need to email me or come by my office, let's put it in this document. I'll check it on whatever cadence makes sense for this relationship, and I'll get those things done. What John needs is a place to put these thoughts, knowing that Marla's going to pick them back up. Second to that, now this is me getting into my art system a little bit. So I am a couple of steps ahead of where you might be if you haven't been exposed to that. I'd recommend going back and watching that webinar from April. What I teach in the inbox is behavioral change to manage your inbox and get to inbox zen. And in doing so, I recommend setting up what I call action folders, which are just basically organizing. These are the emails that are not yet done. We still need to decide, sign, pay, whatever the case may be. So Outlook, Gmail has similar functionality, but I'm going to talk in terms of Outlook here. Outlook has a really great system called Quick Steps and Rules that can actually talk to each other when they know what to be expected. So Marla could help John set up a quick step that could even be called like random thoughts to Marla. And in that, the subject line could have like random thoughts : blank. And then the message could be templated or not. And the simple shift we would ask of John is when you have these things that you need to communicate to Marla, start by clicking this button. Instead of new message, you're going to click this button. And it's already going to be stamped with random thoughts : whatever you want to use for that. I'm calling it random thoughts so that you're getting the idea here. And then John says, hey, Marla, remind me that I'm going to need to call this client back on Friday afternoon. Send. So he is still able to get those thoughts to Marla. Now on Marla's end, in her inbox, she sets up a rule that when John sends her an email with random thoughts in the subject line, they go into an action folder of random thoughts from John. So now Marla's working. John is still able to send these. That's my timer going off. Sorry about that. John can still send these messages to Marla. Marla can still receive the messages, but instead of interrupting her and her flow and her priorities, they're going to get nicely put into a folder. And then again, whatever cadence makes sense, whether it's I need to go there twice a day or I can go there once a week, that's to be defined in that independent relationship that Marla and John have. But now we've created a process, a system that didn't change much in terms of what John's doing. In fact, it helped him because instead of having to hit new message, Marla's name, subject line, all he has to do is tap one button. It will already fill in that he is sending this to Marla, and it will already have the start of the subject line there. And so all he has to add is, what is that thought that I need to get translated to her? So that is a way I would recommend. If I were coaching Marla and or John, I would help them set up this communication. And ultimately, I think everyone would feel better in this situation. And then we could get into other strategies like on my team, we have a Microsoft Planner task card for every every meeting that we're having, we have an agenda card. And so people can go in there and just write whatever they have thought of and park it for, hey, the next time we meet, we need to talk about these things. So that can mitigate the shoot from the hip emails, those quick, terse, urgent emails. Okay, let's get into key takeaways. This is very quick here at the end. Thank you for staying on. There's also a handout in the Google Docs drive that Rin put in the Q&A board, or the chat, excuse me. Feel free to grab those. And you've got a printout of the takeaways there. Support through systems. Don't pressure, adjust the systems and not the people. So even in the case of John and Marla, we didn't change John in any way. We changed the system, and it has helped Marla support him better and the other attorneys she supports because it freed up her time. Neurodivergence is not a barrier or a joke. It's a call for creativity and for your superpower. You're not alone. The ABA study I put in the beginning shows that you're not alone. And there are tools in a community that can support you, and that small shifts can yield large results. So I'm going to pull all of these up. These were some of the suggestions I had to start small. What is the one change that you might make? Is it create one standing weekly routine meeting with your support staff, or if you're the support staff with the attorney? Why don't we meet for no more than 15 minutes, that's that Parkinson's law, and high level cover what are the reminders this week? What are the prompts? What are the projects, the tasks? Is it pick one project and use that mental simulation to get started tomorrow or this afternoon? Is it start that collaboration document that I suggested with John and Marla? Maybe you like that idea where it's like, hey, I thought we could both have access to this document and we could just be putting thoughts in there that we can, it's like an agenda, but it's more informal. It's kind of your random thoughts, and I'll go and I will get those thoughts out of there so that I'm not getting 13 emails from you in one day. So what's that one thing that you're going to do? And Ren, let's go ahead and pull that up. Yeah. So if you've already thought of it, why don't you, I love the last one. I'm going to do something. I haven't thought of it yet because I'm just still processing everything, but I'm going to do something. All right, let's share this result. Okay, check out Firm Focus resources. Great. Create a take action mantra. Yeah, I didn't talk a lot about that, but that take action mantra could be the one I said. What is my next action? Or I also didn't talk about this. Another strategy I often use is I know it's hard, like the now versus the not now, but you know yourself in this moment. It's the same person that's going to be showing up on Friday. I like to think about that person, that future me, and how can I give that future me a little gift? So I think I don't want to do this right now, but the me on Friday, what will I need to do now so that the me on Friday says, you know what, Sarah, I'm really proud of you. You did that thing on Wednesday, and now instead of your Friday afternoon working on it, because you procrastinated and paralysis and you allowed all of the distractions and everything, now the Friday you gets to just maybe leave early, maybe work on this other thing, maybe work on that business development. I just had this happen to a client last week who had something that he was very, very much procrastinating on. We had talked about it in the session last Monday, and we did the mental simulation for Friday. And I coached him through what would it look like if the Friday you did this thing. And he said, well, I would be elated. I would enjoy my weekend. I wouldn't have to think about it. Not only was that super effective, he actually got started on it, on Thursday. I got excited there because I know the end of this story. He got started on it on Thursday, realized that he could delegate it to the paralegals and his associates. He met with them, delegated out the pieces of it. They're now working on it. He didn't even have to touch it on Friday. And he was telling me he's in Indianapolis, that he went to the, oh my gosh, I'm embarrassed to admit, I forgot the name of the basketball team that's in someone give it to me in the chat box, but he went to the game, and he also had a firm-wide like zoo event that they sponsor. And his state of mind, he's like, I was present and saw people, and it was so much different than what would happen is I wouldn't have even started it. And then I would have beaten myself up. And then at this event, I would have been thinking like, I've got to work on it tonight or tomorrow morning or over the weekend. And instead he changed his own narrative. And it was through the prompts of what's the next action and what will that future you look like. So be keeping that in mind. So that might be a mantra you can consider. All right, so last slide here. These are the resources. You can grab them from Firm Focus Resources. You can sign up for our productivity hack emails. Just so you are aware, we do offer one-on-one or small team coaching. And I always have a complimentary discovery call, no pressure. So even if you just want 30 minutes of my time to talk a little bit about your scenario, and I can offer up some strategies there. Please connect with me on LinkedIn. And finally, if we can't help you, we also have a wide range of power partners we work with who have different expertise from ADHD. We work with attorneys with ADHD, but sometimes we have others that really need a coach that just specializes in ADHD, which is also in our network, and I'm happy to share those resources. Now is where I will invite you to raise that virtual hand if you'd like to come off of mute and ask any questions. I don't think we have any in the digital questions, so we'll just do a live Q&A. And thank you for those of you who stayed on and who read and who offered some really valuable insights to those case studies. I appreciate it.
All right. Once again, if you'd like mic access, just raise your hand. Great,
Hey,
Rachel.
Hi. I'm just wondering what your thoughts are. I have an attorney that has trouble getting his time entries to me so that I can enter his time. And I send him emails and it's still not getting done until the very last minute. So I'm wondering what your thoughts are on the best way to make that not be a last minute thing.
Absolutely. This is a very, very common problem. And sometimes it's even the identifiable problem that we get brought in on. And then that kind of unlocks some other time management challenges. The reminders in this case, they know, and they feel that they are behind on time, and they are beating themselves up internally about it pretty often. There's some that don't care, that are, that say, you know, like, I'll get it in by the end of the month and it's going to be fine. I'm going to talk to that person for a moment, and then I'll kind of answer your question as well, Rachel. When I'm coaching the attorney who struggles getting their time entered, I just want to remind you that it is really only hurting yourself, because if you're not doing it contemporaneously, or even at the end of the day, what you're doing is you are having to give up either your weekends or your nights or your billable time to go back and try to reinvent what happened the last week or the last month. And I track my time every day, because one, I just want to know where I spend my time in my business. And two, I've developed the habit now where it's just, I start the clock, I write the note of what it is I'm doing, and then I stop the clock before I start the next one. So we can make it a habit, that trigger, action, reward. The habit the way I like to present it to my clients, and yes, I know I'm also raising the awareness that you already know. Yes, I know I'm only hurting myself. I know I'm recreating time through email and phone calls and calendar, etc. Think of everything you do, every action you take, because attorneys have to bill your time. This is just part of your daily hygiene for being a lawyer. It's part of your daily hygiene. So stop fighting it and think of it as bookends to the action. So it's not, I need to send, or I need to work on this declaration. It is, I need to start the timer. Or if you don't want to use timers, that's fine, but you go in and you manually put, I am now starting this task, I am doing this task, and I am ending this task in my timekeeping software. I'm going to go start something else. So I start the task, I do the task, I end it in the timekeeping software. And I'm familiar with, time slips and 3Tabs. I think that they were bought out. There's so many other ones too. They all have the functionality of timers, which I do advocate for. There are some clunky system I've seen, like SharePoint is, sorry if there's any SharePoint reps, but not, from what I've seen, it's harder because you have to almost open up a browser. But for many of them, you can turn on the timer, and even if you don't know the full description, you've given yourself enough information and a hint so that when you do finalize it at the end of the day or the end of the week, you're not having to recreate your entire time. So bookend it. Rachel, in terms of recommendations, depending on your role and everything, sometimes the attorney might benefit from coaching because it's the external person that can help them through it. And really, it's about the carrot or the stick. So how are they responding? So it sounds like the reminders, which is more of like the stick of it, is not really working. It's not really effective for this person. So depending on your role and relationship, maybe you can offer this advice that I just said, the coaching I said about the bookends. And I can promise that the attorneys that I have been successful in changing their behavior to do it more contemporaneously have always reported back like, yeah, it wasn't harder. It took changing my habits, but it wasn't harder. And at the end of the week or the end of the month, they're like, and I loved that I didn't have to go back and recreate time. So, and sorry, I get off on a long tangent on this because they're leaking. Not only is it like the 3 hours they have to sit down at the end of the month, but there are 0.1s in there that are just lost. And we have this pressure of the billable hour requirement. So you're only hurting yourself. You can't bill the client for that 3 hours that you sat and did your time entries. You can absorb the billable time entry in the bookend if you do it as a bookend, right? Because then it's like a second for starting the timer, doing the action, ending the action. And now you've accrued that time as part of that activity. So bookends. Sorry. And Rachel, let me know if you want to connect one-on-one or if you have anything else to add to that. Yeah. Any other questions? Amazing. Well, please feel free to reach out. I value all of you. I appreciate your time and staying over. Oh, we went way over 11:30. I apologize for that. So my little clock in front of my eyes stopped and I lost track of time. I got a little bit into my own time blindness here. So appreciate all of you. Have a great rest of your week. And right now, I recommend think about what is that next thing you need to work on, when can you do it, and what is that next action you're going to take. Excellent. Thank you.
You may be eligible for CLE credit in your state. Visit bhba.org/podcasts for more information.